Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the Buffett and Beyond Weekly ETF video letter, and this is for Saturday, March 16th, 2024. And this week we're going over the materials ETF, also the tech and semiconductors, which are topping the S&P 500 by almost double. Yes, and here is that big vehicle that is digging for materials. They call it mining, folks. And remember, if you want to live on this beach like Jimmy Buffett once did, you've got to learn how to invest even better than Warren Buffett does now. And let us look at the finance and the materials ETF. And the reason is that's all we've been hearing about this past week. So let's see how they've done over the past 5 years. Now, remember, we pick the top stocks out of each ETF. And so we pick the top stocks out of the ETFs that are outperforming the S&P 500 because we have a much better chance of doing even better. If they're outperforming the S&P 500, that means the top stocks are way outperforming the S&P 500. So let's look at the finance, which is the XLF, and the materials, which is the XLB. Now, there are other finance and materials ETFs, but we'll just use these two for today. And the black line is the S&P 500, and we're looking at 5 years. So we can see that both of these, the finance, which is the blue line, materials, which is the mustard-colored line, both underperforming by quite a bit the S&P 500 over 5 years. So when we look at other ETFs that we like to talk about, and which we will talk about at the end of this letter, the QQQs, which are the NASDAQ 100 stocks, XLK, the tech-orientated ETF, and XSD, which is a semiconductor ETF. So we look at those three. Again, black line is the S&P 500. We could look at those three and we say, oh my gosh, they totally outperform the S&P 500. Therefore, the best stocks in these three ETFs will really outperform the S&P 500. Now, let's look at 5 years, the top stocks in the materials ETF. And we're looking at Avery Dennison, stock symbol AVY. We're looking at Ball Corporation, stock symbol BAL. Sherwin-Williams, SHW. We are looking at AMCR, which is the stock symbol and also the name of the company. And CF, same thing, CF Holdings, and the stock symbol is CLF. And the Albemarle Corporation, which stock symbol is ALB. So when we look at those stocks compared to the S&P 500, we see that only one, Sherwin-Williams, is really outperforming and has outperformed in the past the S&P 500. The others have been ahead of the S&P 500 at certain periods of time, but over a 5-year period, we're looking at CF Industries and we're looking at Avery Dennison, which are just a little bit ahead of the S&P 500, and then the other three stocks are lagging the S&P 500 by a long way. And these are the best stocks in this materials ETF. So guess what, folks? We don't like an ETF, even though it's performed well over the past month or so, doesn't mean that it's going to outperform over the long term. So why even mess with it? Why buy it? And why even try to buy the top stocks in that industry? Because guess what? None of these top stocks, with the exception of Sherwin-Williams, is doing anything that is noteworthy relative to the S&P 500. So Sherwin-Williams is definitely our top pick in the materials industry, but we have better stocks in the other ETFs. And here we are with the materials, and we can see that as of this past Thursday, the 14th, March 14th, we see the XLB up, or the materials ETF up 6.1%, with the S&P up 8%. And the top stocks in this ETF and ALB, Albemarle, folks, is really dragging it down. So where the top stocks are up only 2.2%. So the message that we're trying to return here is why even get into these type of ETFs if they don't outperform? And folks, the materials does not outperform over the long term. So let's go to technology. Okay, same date, Thursday afternoon. The XLK is up 8.5%. The S&P is up 8%. But the top stocks in our XLK are up 14.1%. And if you were 10% hedged, so in other words, if you're 10% hedged, that means if this XLK goes down, you're going to make money on 10% of your portfolio. And guess what? When you reach near a bottom, or when the market starts turning around again and we get signals that we're going up, then you take that 10%, cash it in for cash, and you buy more of these top stocks or another stock if you wish. But that's how you add to your portfolio as you go along in life. You don't take money out of your pocket. You could take money out of your pocket or just do nothing at the market bottom. You have 10% of your portfolio that may be able to be cashed or will be able to be cashed in, and you buy more stocks. That's how you add to your portfolios, folks. And let's look at the semiconductor. Well, the semiconductor's not doing too well this year. It's down 1.4% with the S&P up 8%. But folks, the top 6 stocks that we picked for the semiconductor ETF up 18.9%. And if you're 10% hedged, you're up 18.3%. So yeah, the hedge costs a little bit, but this is a triple inverse ETF of the semiconductors. And guess what, folks? Since it's triple, you can put or just use 3% of your money to buy a 10% hedge. So you would be getting a 18.3% return. Folks, you're more than doubling the S&P. You're still 10% hedged, which means that you could buy more stocks if this semiconductor ETF goes through a correction and you cash in your hedge, you buy more stocks, and then this number really gets large as time goes on. Now, we look at our sector all-stars, and this is the 3 ETFs that we like the best: the technology, the semiconductors, and the QQQs, which is the NASDAQ 100. And we picked about 18 stocks. We made a beautiful portfolio out of it. And even though the QQQs, which we use as our hedge, is up 7.2%, the portfolio itself, our top stocks, up 14.5%, close to doubling the S&P and actually doubling the QQQs right at this point, which is 2.5 months into the 2024 year. And if you were 10% hedged, there you go, up 14%, up almost double the S&P 500. You've got a 10% hedge on there, which means when we go through a little correction, you can cash in this 10% hedge and buy more shares of stock. And you don't have to take anything out of your pocket, folks. It's right there in this portfolio. So let's look at the NASDAQ 100. And again, the QQQs are up 7.2%, but the top stocks that we picked out of the QQQs, and when I say top stocks, it's by using our clean surplus methodology that Warren Buffett once used. And folks, we're up 16.7%, double the S&P 500, and that includes this real stock that's in a downdraft, which happens to be Tesla, I'll tell you right now. So we're up 16.7%, double the S&P 500, more than double the QQQs themselves. And if you're 10% hedged, you're up 16.1%. Folks, this is a beautiful way to go, beautiful way to spend a weekend, knowing that you're making this kind of money only 2.5 months into the new year. So folks, we had a rough week this week, but our portfolios are doing very, very well. So even though the market is having a little bit of trouble in here, we're doing very, very well. So remember, if you want to be on this beach like Jimmy Buffett once was, then you've got to learn how to invest even better than Warren Buffett. So folks, you go out this weekend, you stay safe, be with your family, watch television, take your mind off everything, because guess what? The market will be open again on Monday, and we'll be right here with you, folks. Take care, stay safe.